Welcome back to Bass Boat Wiring Part 2, Beyond the Basics. Save money by doing it yourself and you will learn how to solve potential problems down the road. If you find the video enjoyable or helpful, a like, share, subscribe is always very much appreciated. You have a similar Ranger to this 520C. You may be very interested in the mounting of the charger location to save you space. Here's a quick look to see everything charging. And you can see the light patterns on the 36 volt charger and on the Minn Kota PCL charger. The battery compartment of the Ranger is going to look significantly different from that of the Triton battery compartment. Before we explore the new battery compartment under here, let's take a look at the old Triton battery compartment. In part 1, I showed you boat wiring basics on the Triton. Everything worked really well on the Triton, but I had very limited space to add options such as new Minn Kota Raptors. Here we go with the install of the 36 volt. And you can see they're 36 volt 50 amps. We got one there, one here. Gonna hook them up in parallel and convert this puppy over to lithium batteries. The 36 volt amp charger is pretty compact, as you can see. It is a waterproof onboard charger, so we're going to get that mounted up to charge our 36 volt 50 amp hour lithium batteries that are hooked up in parallel. Just before I install the 36 volt amped battery charger, you can see that it's pretty tiny. It's less than 8 inches long and about 5 inches wide. I am mounting this charger in a tight place, so I need to make sure that the charging indicator light, which green is full, is clearly visible. And I only have 2 connections here, a negative and a positive. The carrying strap on the amped battery can be removed, and it's a great way to securely strap in your batteries, as you can tell right there. So that's a bonus feature of these batteries. I am running two 50 amp hour 36 volt batteries in parallel. So the negative of the battery charger goes to one battery and it will go to the positive of the other. And I'll show you that once I hook it up. My batteries are secured with TH Marine straps and clips, and I have one on each of my 36 volt amped batteries. To simplify the process of installing this charger in a tight space, I've used some ultra high molecular weight polyethylene, and you can see that I'm countersunk 1, 2, 3 spots, and they will be my base spots for the mounting screws. By using this template, it is definitely going to make life easier because I have 2 screws here that I will be able to slide the charger into. You can see it's notched there, and it has similar notches on the other side. So this side here will be the tight side, and then I'll just put those in, and then I can simply slide it into place. You can see here how simple a process it is going to be to lock that in place. So I'm simply going to slide it in. Oops, sorry about that. And then now all I have to do is and you can see it's already pre-drilled. All I have to do is insert the 2 screws and the mounting of my onboard charger will be complete. Here's my template in place, ready to mount the charger. It will be easy to slide in on those 2 pre-drilled screws and then just add the other 2 and tighten everything up, and we're good to go. The charger is in place, it's all hooked up, and you can see that I've got a template down there, and that template is going to be for a Minn Kota Precision 10 amp PCL charger, because on the cranking side I have a lithium and an AGM battery. I got the specs from the Minn Kota charger off the website, and I'm just waiting for it to come in, but that way I knew I would have room for both here in this nice convenient spot, and it frees up space for other things in the back of the boat here. As I'm about to clean up the charger wiring, I can't tell you how many times I have been thankful for these Velcro cable wraps. I have the wires cleaned up. I'm going to get an adhesive cable tie to secure those in. I'll show you those a little bit later. But you can see the one lead is negative is coming to the first battery, and the red positive is going to the second battery, and that's how I'm going to charge the two 36 volt 50 amp hour batteries at one time. Here are the cable tie mounts I referred to earlier, and they simply have a channel for the cable tie to go through, and as you can see here, there's an adhesive sticker that you simply peel and stick to the area that you want your wires to be held to. All the wiring is quality marine tinned wire. I will add some dielectric grease to the terminals just to avoid any possible sources of corrosion. This raised ledge was dead space that is a super convenient spot to mount both of my chargers. Let's take a look at the cable connections. You can see here with the red electrical tape that I have a jumper cable going from positive to positive. You can see the red up there, the bottom of the upside down U. And then you can see up here the negative, I have a jumper cable, and that is all 6-gauge marine tinned wiring. This red connector comes from the amped 36 volt charger, and you can see that it travels to this negative here and comes along there to the positive. So that's the charger connection on the battery of one connected to the other. The yellow arrow in each photo indicate the negative lead for the trolling motor, and in this case the positive lead for the trolling motor. The trolling motor wires that are coming from the bow of the boat are going to be connected to the negative terminal on 136 volt battery, and you can see here the other positive lead from the trolling motor is now connected to the opposite battery. It's a nice clean install with 2 cables on each terminal. You can see the high density molecular weight board, and it is in there ready for the Minn Kota Precision 220 PCL. In this case, the L stands for lithium, and you can see that they now are designed to charge lithium, even though they did before. It's specifically saying lithium now. Battery selection number 2 is going to be the lithium, and I put a little green wire on the charger leads, and that just reminds me that it's the amped green, so that I hook up the correct terminals to the lithium battery. The other battery selection is going to be for the AGM, which is for cranking, and that will have the leads over here, and I'll rig those all up nicely, and I'll show you those later. This mounting leaves the chargers high and dry, and you can see that I have my oil jug here and leaves lots of room and access to the bottom bilge area. If you've used a Minn Kota precision charger before, you'll notice that the battery 1, which is the left, is the AGM, and flashing green means it's fully charged. It will go solid green after 24 hours. On the right, the lithium is already charged, it's solid green, and it starts with a blinking green light and goes to green when charged. On the left, the AGM goes yellow, gradual 1, 2, 3 until it's finished charging, and then it flashes green. Here's a quick look to see everything charging, and you can see the light patterns on the 36 volt charger and on the Minn Kota PCL charger. The AGM is the charging amber colored lights on the left on the Minn Kota 220 PCL. The green flashing light is the lithium charging. It will go solid green when it's completely charged. And the 36 volt, you can see it's flashing red and will go green when completely charged. The background noise you hear is from a fan in the 36 volt charger. It is only a single green light flashing, but it's just the angle that makes it look like there's two. My Triton had 531 series batteries, as you can see, and that is a lot of weight. The beauty of going to lithium and 236 volts is it's much lighter and you free up a lot of space. Lithium batteries maintain high constant voltage for long periods of time versus standard batteries which taper off in a steady decline of power. Oleg had 5 batteries in the boat prior to my getting it, and by adding the 36 volt you can see I eliminated one of the batteries. Oleg's boat rigging skills are exceptional and I simply followed his suggestions with a few tweaks here and there. Here are the 2 Minn Kota power port outlets, and this one down here was already in a pre-existing position and was not in a very nice position. As you can tell, we had to notch out to get the bottom screw out, which is covered by the flap. And over here we mounted the next one a little bit higher. So basically we are good to go. Just 2 extension cords, plug in, and all my batteries on the boat are charging, which is going to be awesome and super convenient. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to Oleg and Don Yeremy for all of their help and assistance with rigging up my new-to-me Ranger. I needed 2 Minn Kota power port outlets because I needed a outlet for the 36 volt amped charger and one for the Minn Kota 220 PCL. I prefer extension cords that are 12 gauge, and I have 2. You can see the one on the far side, and there you can see the 2 extension cords have the lighted ends, which is awesome, and I can see that everything is charging as it should. The convenience of the 2 plug-in chargers is absolutely so efficient. I love it. I highly recommend the Minn Kota power port outlets. Let's shift now from the batteries and chargers area to the front of the boat, and let's look at the bow. The wires from the foot pedal go through the tray to the bow, and these wires are a source of potential interference. The wires run through a grommet to the bow area where I have installed a fuse panel. The trolling motor wires have been wrapped in pipe insulation, and the pipe insulation goes down and it is butted up against the rod tubes. The pipe insulation protects all the other wires from interference. By running the trolling motor wires through the rod tube, it is then joined directly to the wiring that comes from the back of the boat, and you can see that it is cable tied here to the sleeve, and the wires go from the sleeve to the back of the boat. The Ranger system is wired direct, eliminating the need for a plug. Here's the connection box that joins the trolling motor wires to the wires coming from the back of the boat to the front of the boat. Add dielectric grease here too. The foot pedal, and now you can see that the trolling motor wiring is going through the middle grommet there. In part 1 of the video on wiring basics for a bass boat, you know that I like to keep organized. So on the right hand side here, these are my Ethernet or communication cables if you prefer. And over here is the power cables. And these are actually going through a golf sleeve tube. One on the right and one on the left. So going from here to the back side here, you can now see that I have the back of the Gulf sleeve tube here and the back of the Gulf sleeve tube here. I filed down the edges so they were rounded, so there were no sharp edges. And then the Velcro cable wraps are very handy, and there's one over here as well. My communication cables, Ethernet cables, and my power cables, nicely organized and separated as much as possible from the trolling motor wiring, which is again protected by the pipe insulation as well. So it's double insurance. There are two sets of tubes, the one we saw previously and another set of tubes over here. And this is where I have the fuse panel attached to, and again, these are coming. Instead of using screws to mount the fuse panel, there's a cable tie in each one of the four corners, and that is securing the panel to the rod tubes from the center rod storage. 8-gauge marine tinned wire is ran directly to my amped hour 160 amp hour lithium battery, and here is the negative at the bottom, and these are the negative terminals to attach your wiring to. Up here at the top is your positive wiring, again direct to the lithium battery at the back, and I get a steady 13.2 volts up here at the front, and all my positive connections are here, and over here on this side you can see I'm running down there. Dielectric grease is helpful to preventing corrosion, as mentioned in part 1. I've also added dielectric grease around the terminal connections, once again to prevent corrosion. It is the front of a bass boat, and I do live near the Great Lakes and fish Lake Erie a fair bit, so it's inevitably going to get wet in there. I also put dielectric grease in the fuse areas as well, just to again keep corrosion out of there, and it's not going to do any damage in terms of conductivity for the circuit. The red lights running up the center are there in the event that I have a fuse that is broken, and the light will come on indicating that there is a problem at that fuse connection. Because of the cable ties in the corner of the fuse panel mounts, it's not a perfect fit for the lid, but I just took 2 cable ties, wrapped them together, wrapped them right down around the rod tube at the bottom and all the way around, being careful not to pinch any wires in there, and you can see that the cover is on nice and secure. So it's just a little bit of added protection for water staying off of the fuse panel in the bow of the boat. There is a minimal cost difference between a 6 fuse panel and a 12 fuse panel, so I would suggest you go with the 12 if you have the space available, and then you can add in accessories as needed. In summary, for the bow panel, the fuse panel is located in the center. Always keep the trolling motor wires separate from the electronics wires as much as you possibly can, and they run up the port side of the boat. Fuse panels in the middle, and I got a lot going on with Target Lock and Mega Live and 4 units, so there is excess cable, and I try and keep it as organized but separate as possible. So do the best you can, and be neat, be organized, and be thorough with your wiring, and you should have good success. The electronics wiring all runs up through the starboard side of the boat. Here is the console of my Ranger, and here's the day box right in front, and that is where I have my hubs. With the day box open, you can see in here that I have my 2 hubs, and underneath I made sure I left room for a 3rd hub if I wanted to expand my one boat network. Labels are super helpful when troubleshooting. The 2 connectors without the silver connection pieces, and those over here are the power sources for the hub, and those run to the fuse panel at the console. Notice the cable wraps being used at different points in the system, And as I've mentioned previous times, they are super helpful. Sometimes I'll even add a piece of identifying tape as that piece of red tape there, just when running a wire. It's just a helpful suggestion. Let's look specifically at what I have set up in my One Boat Network hub system. Over here, you can see I have the two power connections, and these power connections go to my console fuse panel. I have a cable Velcro wrap here, just isolating those. I have a jump cable that is linking the two hubs together, and my jump cable goes from number 5 here down to number 1 over here, and I've got it labeled jump and jump. I have over here my target lock control head. The Ethernet connection comes in here. I have an extra space available here. I have the G2N at my console that is connected here and runs back to the console. I have my side imaging unit at the console connected here, and I have 3 MDI units connected at the front. The iPilot link cable right here comes with the unit. The 3 MDI cables, the Ethernet cables I use here, are 15 feet long. The jumper is a 5 foot, and the 2 Ethernet cables here, as I mentioned, going to the console, are also 5 feet long. I used a 15-foot Ethernet cable for the target lock control head, but I would recommend that you use a 20-foot Ethernet cable instead. From the hub, I run a 5-foot, actually 2 5-foot Ethernet cables. And they just kind of come up the side and then underneath the console. And I only need 5 foot because it's a very short distance. And they plug into the Helix with a dongle here. And again, the cable collector here. So a 5-foot Ethernet cable and a dongle, and you connect directly to the hub from there. Here's my 2 units set up at the console. And in case some of you are curious, these straps here are just old waiter straps sewn together to help hold the covers on, even though they stay on fairly secure. It's just added insurance. The triple mount at the front is made by Geiger Tech, and the dual mount at the console is also made by Geiger Tech. Got the Humminbird target lock connected here, and I have my Mega 360 and my Mega Live, and everything at the current hub system is running with 2 units at the front. I have 2 Helix 12s. The hub Ethernet cables run to the back of the unit. You do need a dongle to connect the Helix units. They will go direct to a Solix or Apex, but this is where the communication cables or the Ethernet cables come out and are connected to the Helix unit. You can also see that I have a triple mount system with my 2 Helixes here that I just showed you, but I also have the mount for the 3rd one, and here is where the cable from the Ethernet hub is coming out right here in the middle, and that is the end of the dongle in the cable collector. These ASETH5PXG 5-port Ethernet switches are only recommended to run 4 Humminbird units. I originally thought you could run 5, and so I had 1, 2, 3 units for up at the front for a triple mount system, and I had 1, 2 units at the console here, and so I have just left the cabling in place for the current time, but this MDI Ethernet cable is not connected to a unit at the front. With the ASETH5PXG Ethernet switch, you are limited to 3 switches in a daisy chain and no more. Here's the documentation from Humminbird saying that you are limited to 4 control heads and 3 switches in a daisy chain. Humminbird has addressed this issue of not being able to connect 5 Humminbird control heads to a One Boat network by the introduction of a new 5-port Ethernet switch. The new Humminbird 5-port Ethernet switch has greener amber lights showing connectivity to the attached Ethernet device. This new switch will accommodate 5 Humminbird control heads. These new switches are compatible with Helix G3N, G4N, Solix, and Apex. You can daisy chain up to 6 of these switches for great expandability of your one boat network. The fuse panel is mounted underneath the console, and notice that there is a clearance of wires around it, just again to keep everything free from possible sources of interference. And I have the 8-gauge marine tin wire negative from the battery, and at the top you can't really see it, but again it's an 8-gauge positive marine tin wire going to supply the power to this console fuse panel. Here is a cable tie mount that is used to support the 8-gauge wires coming from the battery. There is a small aluminum bracket for the fuse panel, and it is mounted to the base of the console. I did not use a cover on this fuse panel just because it's a little bit awkward to get in and out of there. And I also used dielectric grease to protect the connections, but once again it's under the console, so it's pretty dry, so I didn't feel I needed the cover in this case. The 2 connections on the left with the orange fuses are for my 2 console units, and the 2 connections on the right with the purple fuses are for the 2 hubs that were located in front of the console. With the 12 fuse panel option, I have lots of space to add further connections in the future if needed. The container lid for the battery compartment, you will see, has a wiring diagram, which is super convenient, and you always know where it is. So I think that's a great Ranger option. Another thing I really appreciate about the Ranger is that the hinges are on the back, so it opens up to the back instead of opening up from the front here, which makes it much easier to get the batteries in and out. Even though my lithiums are much lighter, I still super appreciate the convenience of being able to get the batteries in and out in a easier fashion. For wiring purposes, this hinge system is superior. The cranking and dedicated amped lithium battery for my electronics are secured by 1TH marine strap and clip here. Let's take a closer look at the wiring for the dedicated electronics battery. So let's focus on the negative terminal first. And you can see the smaller wire up here is connected to the Minn Kota precision charger lithium. And I have the 2 8-gauge marine tin wires connected here, and they will run directly to the fuse panel at the bow and at the console. On the positive side, you will notice that there is the precision charger lithium charging wire going into the positive terminal, but you will notice that there is only one other connection, and that is a 4-gauge marine tin wire connection, and I will show you where that goes. The 4-gauge wire goes into a 60 amp breaker, and some more 4-gauge wire from here travels to the switch, which is dedicated for the electronics. And there's the switch. Here is the 4-gauge marine tin wire from the breaker coming into the switch, and you can see it in comparison. It's a little tough to see, but the switch in my fingers are the 2 8-gauge marine tin wire that will run into the switch. So it is basically directly connected to the battery, but it does go through a switch and breaker first. This is the original switch that comes with the Ranger, and basically all the other electronics are run from the AGM, and they are controlled by that switch. In summary, this was the original Ranger switch, and it is basically doing all of the electronics functions that are controlled by the AGM battery. The additional switch that Oleg, who I bought the boat from, and he did an amazing job wiring everything, and it was one of the reasons, truthfully, that I bought the boat. He added this little bracket and switch here for the dedicated electronics battery, which in my case is the Lithium amped outdoors 160 amp hour capacity.
Highlighted here is the cable tie I referred to in the next clip. It's a great idea to have additional accessories such as your shallow water anchors and jack plate run through the main switch as well. The cable tie is holding 12 gauge wire that was used for the jack plate and shallow water anchors. The 4 gauge marine wire running from the positive AGM terminal is encapsulated in split loom and runs to the main switch. This 4 gauge wire will power the Ranger rigged switch panels. The AGM also has a breaker working in conjunction with the Ranger switch.
The lid diagram certainly does come in handy. So for example, you can see from the cranking battery that the red goes into the main switch, and there's the main switch there. And from the main switch, you get a lead going into the 30 amp main breaker, and then it is distributed the positive to the boat. On the negative side of the AGM, you can see that there's been an additional terminal clip here that has been added just to clean up the wiring and make it more efficient, and those wires would go directly to the accessory that is being used. So there's the negative side from the AGM.
The accessories attached here using 12 gauge marine wire are the jack plate and the shallow water anchors.
In addition to the switches for my dedicated lithium and my AGM battery accessories, you can also on the Ranger turn off the trolling motor wiring.
In part 1 of Boat Wiring Basics, I talked about these terminal connectors, and let's go into a deeper dive and see exactly how these terminal connectors work. For those of you that dislike soldering, you will love these connectors. In this photo here, you can see I went the extra mile by putting red shrink tube and black shrink tube over top of the terminal connectors, but it's not necessary.
Let's take a closer look at these terminal connectors. So I'm just going to strip off about 1/4 of an inch with my wire strippers, and that's all I need. These, I'm not sure if you can see that, there you go. These 16 to 22 gauge terminals work very well. So all I need to do is just simply take that and I just insert it in, and you can see that it disappears nicely into there, and I just have to take that and then crimp it. Use the proper crimping space, and this one is going to be 14 to 16 gauge, and that will do it nicely. And make sure you crimp the silver metal part. Let's do the actual crimping. So I'm going to make sure that that wire is still in the metal part, and it is, and I'm going to give it a good squeeze. One, and again, I got to make sure I'm on the metal. Sometimes I'll do a second one just to make sure, and again, I'm going to give that a squeeze, and in 2 hands, give her a good squeeze. And once you've got that squeezed in on the metal, and again, right now, that's a good connection, but it's going to be better soon. Since they are tin copper, both the wire and the rings, they're going to be corrosion resistant. And also, the beauty is that I don't have to solder. You can see in here that the shrink wrap is in there, but there's also an adhesive in there, and I'm going to get the heat gun on them and you'll see what I mean. You won't hear much, but you'll get an idea how they seal up.
like to heat it up so that you can just see the start of the adhesive oozing out here, and you can see some of it oozing out here, and that creates a great bond and a great seal. It's a much better way than the old soldering, which took forever. You can also see how the shrink wrap has made a nice tight seal to the black wire. Quick and efficient and good to go. In review, the switch to the 36 amped 50 amp hour batteries, 36 volt, has been a tremendous space saver, and the Minn Kota charger and the 36 volt charger being mounted on this ledge have also saved me a tremendous amount of space. And that little charger, I am super impressed with how quickly those batteries charge up. It seems like it's 3 or 4 hours and they are done and charged, so that is definitely a bonus. I have lots of options now for here. I can put that plate back in, and I can mount my spare prop on there. I'm just waiting to get my Raptors installed, and once I have them installed, I may need this space for the pump, so I'm leaving it free for now. But it's great having that option to have space available to mount things. Those of you that have been limited by space in the past, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I really enjoyed my Triton, but I have to admit that I am loving the space and organization of the new upgrades that I have made to the Ranger. It is certainly way easier to work on than the old Triton. Less weight and more space is a definite win-win. I highly recommend a dedicated lithium battery. It is certainly the way to go. And make sure that you have a switch for your electronics dedicated to turning them on and off. And the Ranger, which came with the switch already, is certainly a very helpful tool. And you don't have to worry about wasting any battery power because you've got switches to turn everything off, including the trolling motor wires, as I showed you earlier. When investing in lithium batteries, please remember that not all batteries are created equally. The amped 36 volt batteries are designed specifically to be hooked up in parallel. The amped battery management system on the 250 amp hour batteries will enable me to hook up a Minn Kota Ultrex Quest. I certainly appreciate the engineering and quality construction of my amped batteries, and am very appreciative of the fact that I can run this Minn Kota Ultrex Quest with my 36 volt batteries. Other 36 volt lithium batteries may not work with the Ultrex Quest when hooked up in parallel. Minn Kota recommends checking with the battery manufacturer to make sure they will work. I am really looking forward to adding the Ultrex Quest to my One Boat Network. Minn Kota does recommend 3 12 volt batteries hooked up in series, but it's a great option with the 36 volt system as well for saving space. Factory wiring on boats often leaves a lot to be desired. Learning to do it yourself, you will be able to troubleshoot more electrical issues in the future. Proper wiring will also enable your electronics to function optimally. Wiring with knowledgeable friends certainly enhances the learning curve, and it is always easier to run wires with 2 people as opposed to 1. When rigging boats with my buddy Don Yerme, we always make sure that we take our time and do things the right way the first time. Oleg did a great job originally rigging the Ranger from the factory wiring, and that certainly made the making of this video a lot easier. You don't have to be an electrical expert to wire a boat. A willingness to learn and the initiative to get started is all it takes for you to begin your wiring journey. If you have found this video enjoyable or helpful, a like, share, subscribe is always very much appreciated. Take care and bye for now.